Trump promised Netanyahu. Let me actually read it exactly what is written. Hold on, let me go to it.
This is pretty big, actually.
There it is. Trump pledges to Netanyahu that he will not compromise on Iran's uranium. Channel 13.
Yeah. So that makes any type of negotiated deal so much less likely. It's nearly impossible. And I think that's Netanyahu's aim. I think Netanyahu honestly doesn't care about nuclear material. He knows Iran isn't after a bomb, or at least, well, maybe it is now after the war. But it's really a way to force America to stay in.
So if he's pledged that, Professor, and Iran does not concede it, what does that mean? Does that mean that there is no deal? We're back to the battlefield?
With Trump, of course, it's always hard to tell because obviously he changes his mind and he changes his position from moment to moment. And whether he actually means this or not is hard to say. There has, in general, been the U.S. position has been focused very heavily on the issue of no uranium enrichment.
I will also say that Israel has been pushing the administration to bomb all of Iran's oil infrastructure to make them more accommodating in negotiations. So that's great, too, because that's the Middle East going up in flames.
Even though, to the best of my knowledge, Iran is entitled as a sovereign state and a signatory to the non-proliferation treaties entitled to such enrichment. Iran, so far, at least, seems to be sticking by the idea that it has no intention of developing nuclear weapons. I honestly find that almost hard to believe, just given the fact that it's been attacked multiple times. I'm sure that...
And since it's a credible threat that Israel might decide to nuke Iran. I mean, it's not maybe a high percent chance, but it is a percent chance. And that percent chance goes down if Iran gets a nuke. So if they were smart, actually, I think they'd go for a nuke. Just because Israel's a little bit unhinged as a nation, and it has nuclear weapons.
There are factions within the government that are advocating for nuclear weapons, but so far, at least, the official Iranian position is peaceful nuclear enrichment with no intention of nuclear weapons. That is their position, and the U.S. rejects that. I think the larger issue is that the Trump administration is essentially allergic to serious negotiations. It wants
exactly.
I think that's what it's wanting.
It wants capitulation because Trump needs capitulation for political survival. It's a position he put himself into, Trump, that he allowed himself to be manipulated into a position where if he doesn't get a complete surrender from Iran, everyone in the United States will say this war was not worth it. And with economic pain coming, yeah, he's finished politically.
From Iran all along, the Israeli position quite clearly is, at a minimum, capitulation, possibly breaking up Iran into pieces. And so I think that there's a long-standing and growing tradition in American foreign policy that negotiation is for weak states. It's not always held to, but since the 70s, I think there's been a growing element within the U.S. foreign policy establishment that's very much opposed to any kind of negotiated settlement as a sign of weakness, that America has enough power, we don't have to negotiate. I can paraphrase.
I think Asmongold is of this view, or he still thinks that we are such a great power that we don't need to go and negotiate. We can just bomb a country and get whatever we want. That's why I was raging at him all stream yesterday.
Phrase here, Boutros Ghali in the 1990s, he was the UN Secretary General.
We don't live in that world anymore.
And he wrote in his memoirs that he was very surprised that the U.S. has no need for diplomacy.
Absolutely. All part of Netanyahu's plan for Greater Israel. And I should show this for people who haven't seen it. Here's Netanyahu pointing at Greater Israel, or at the map. But this is Greater Israel. And this is the territory of a lot of different other countries. Syria, Lebanon, Egypt, Iraq, Saudi Arabia. That's Greater Israel. Israel's going to have to fight a lot of other countries to get it.
The Roman Empire, he said, didn't need diplomacy either. And there was like the Roman Empire. I think that was an overstatement at the time because there were instances of negotiation. But in general, the U.S. does not like to negotiate. A negotiation is for countries like Norway or something, or Luxembourg. America doesn't do that, is the idea. I think Israel has a tendency not to do that either. And I think they're very coming up against a wall here. They can't through force get what they want with Iran. And so I think they don't really know what to do.
Professor?
Exactly. The entire deep state, the entire US dollar hegemony is, it's been designed to constantly overthrow new countries. Like there was Libya, Somalia, going after Yemen, going after Syria. That's just in the Middle East. And Iraq too. And it's just geared. That's how you have all these institutional interests that just exist. They will always be at war. We're always, once we've done one country, move on to the next country. No thinking behind it. I mean, thinking, you might start to, consider humanitarian issues and stuff like that. Thinking is a detriment to this system of perpetual war. Like whether we can win or not, that type of thing, not helpful. So it's designed to just keep on going. Except right now, it's run out of easy targets, like Libya, Syria, Iraq. And all that's left is Russia and Iran and China. China, of course, would be the hardest of all. So they started with Russia via Ukraine, and then they went after Iran, like Syria went after Iran with the United States. And it's not working because we finally reached a point where slowly over time, the United States military power has waned. The world has changed to the era of drone warfare. Iran is tougher than any country U.S. empire has gone after before, apart from Russia. And we're just losing this war straight up because we did not prepare for sufficiently.
What is happening behind the scenes? Who are the ones calling the shots? And I'm not talking about, does Netanyahu control Trump? Is there, one person makes every single decision? But there's so many things that are not making sense that I'm trying to understand who has what influence on what happens next, from Trump to his administration, to the advisors, the military advisors.
That's whether Hitler had an idea of what is happening right now and, goals. No, I don't think so. I think the problem is Jews, they separate themselves from any society they're in. They have their like, if you're a Christian nation, you have Jews. It's separation of religion. It can't be more than that. And there is a tendency, it's not always true, it doesn't always have, but a tendency to collude via, like Jews colluding together is something that has happened pretty much wherever they are in every country, and to gain an advantage over non-Jews. It does something that I will say it does tend to happen, and that does tend to turn the rest of people against Jews. And to an extent that I don't really see Christians, like if you have a small Christian minority in a country, I don't see them colluding together in the same way that when there's a small Jewish minority. I don't know a reason for that. But it happens really often, like, in Hollywood, that type of Jewish bankers, they're in finance everywhere in the world. And in finance, basically, I say they engage in nepotism more than other faiths, maybe, I could say, in terms of hiring and promoting. And that tends to turn other people against them. It would be my judgment. Don't have a huge amount to back this up. It's something I've seen repeatedly. It's completely separate from the Zionism, which is its own problem.
So obviously Israel and their influence, to the Chinese, to the Iranians and Mujtaba. What do you think is happening behind the scenes? Because some people are telling me, like I was Professor Morandi yesterday, and he's like, Mario, there won't be peace because of the Zionist regime, because of Israel.
Yeah, and when I'm talking about it's not all Jews. It just... You have a lot of Jews that end up in finance everywhere in the world where you have Jewish population, and disproportionate number often, and that is not really natural.
To an economist 2 days ago, he's like, Mario, the objective is the Strait of Hormuz, and Trump will not give that up. The US officials, the administration would not give up the Strait.
Gas prices, I would really like to give you good news on that, but it's only going to get worse going into the summer. Sorry.
Hormuz is too important for the US. Then I had to speak to someone else, another geopolitical analyst, that tells me, Mario, the decision will be made in Beijing because it's China that indirectly calls the shots on the Iranian side, and they have more leverage over Trump. And obviously, there's one last argument, is that the Iranians, as a sovereign nation, they make their decisions. China has limited influence, and the ball's in their court, not the ball's in their court, but the leverage is on their side. So what's your analysis of kind of the behind the curtains process and power structure?
Yeah, I can't say I have any inside information in terms of people in the government talking to me. I'm not really in that type of a position, but I from what I can gather, it looks to me like Trump's main objective is not to be humiliated. Come out with this and something they can call a victory, with something I can credibly call a victory. I don't think that's possible. I don't think there's any way. can get anything can be called a victory. But I think he's still trying to sort of flail around, trying to figure something out that won't look like a humiliation. Because humiliation.
That's what I've been saying. Trump has been flailing since the beginning of the war. That's the word I think is most describes how Trump is acting. He has no idea what to do.
Of Trump personally and of U.S. foreign policy is where this is headed. I've heard many people talk about a Suez moment, that Britain and France, particularly Britain, realized they were no longer great powers when they were forced to withdraw from Suez in 1956 under pressure. The U.S. is facing a Suez moment here when it's going to have to basically face such a humiliating defeat in a key area that it's going to be very difficult to see the United States as the hegemonic power anymore. And this is something that will happen under Trump. And Trump, I think, is starting to figure out that is where it is headed. And he is. The
thing is, the entire dollar hegemony, the dollar's value hedges on United States continuing to be that hegemon and controlling the rest of the world, keeping the world dollarized. And so losing that hegemony is the start of some serious inflation for the dollar.
As I said, flailing about and trying to come up with something that will prevent that. So I think that's really the key element here. China, I would guess, is trying to. China, I think, wants stability. Stability is very much in China's interest. They do have some limited leverage over Iran, but it seems to me very limited, really. Iran has mostly indigenous weapons production. Iran seems to be willing and able to put up with a heavy element of punishment. They're not really getting that much direct aid from China at this point. They're getting perhaps intelligence information from China and Russia, but they can also get it from Russia. They're not reliant on China. So I don't think that China really can force a deal on Iran, although I think they would like some kind of...
I don't think they can force a deal. I agree with that, but they do have leverage. It's not all powerful. They can't control Iran, but they can. That's why the ceasefire happened. China exerted leverage, and it's one of the biggest buyers of Iranian oil, and that benefits Iran. Iran would be far more worse off if China stopped buying Iranian oil. So it definitely has leverage over Iran, and they have a partnership, but they can't force Iran to take a bad deal.
And have negotiated settlement. Again, in the interest of stability, I don't think they want the world economy to spin out of control, which is where it's headed right now. So I think you have this basic blockage that the United States wants something unachievable and is demanding something unachievable, which is something Trump can call victory, which he can't get. And on account of that, he doesn't want to simply withdraw because that would be defeat. Furthermore, Iran...
That is Iran. If you ask any of these counters what Iran wants more than anything, it wants not to be attacked again. And how does it do that? It does that by denying Trump a victory. If Trump attacks Iran, kills the supreme leader, and then he gets catastrophic loss out of it, no U.S. president will ever want to attack Iran again. They'll see what happened to Trump and look what happened to Republicans and say, yeah, we're not doing that.
Would still control the Straits of Hormuz, which is unacceptable and a humiliation. So I think this really hasn't reached the point where it's going to come to an end. I think that you will see growing economic pressure on the United States, heading towards disastrous economic pressure. And again...
Yes, the pressure on the United States will factor into Trump's decision-making, but it won't change it because politically, even if he knows that pressure on the United States is coming already, and that's why he's desperate for a victory. So when summer arrives and gas prices go over $6 and start going towards $7, he knows that's coming. So it's not going to change his opinion. What will change his opinion is when the rest of the world gets together and starts pressuring him. And yeah, they've already had meetings of leaders of a bunch of countries on how to deal with this without the United States. You're going to see more of that. Eventually, there will be pressure on Trump to capitulate, and it will build sufficiently to force him to do it.
At what point Trump will be the one who will more likely crack than the Iranians, is my estimate of it. Israel is putting a lot of pressure on the United States, obviously, to continue the war. I think that's crazy from the standpoint of Israel. So I don't see how this ends well for Israel, how this has gone well for Israel.
Well, Israel is one thing. Netanyahu is another. Netanyahu is definitely a good thing for this war to continue. He's under accusations of corruptions. The war ends in this way, with Iran stronger. He's finished politically, so he's in the same position as Trump. Basically, he needs a victory out of this war, and he doesn't want it to end without a victory.
Nevertheless, the U.S. seems to want to. Israel wants to see this through, but I think at some point Trump is going to have to simply cast the Israelis aside and make a decision to end this. But we haven't reached that point yet.
I just saw a piece of news. Sorry for looking down, but that just came in now. The Israeli military Mossad. Let me see what the source is quickly. I'll read it and I'll tell you the source. I think it's Channel 12. The Israeli military and Mossad presented Netanyahu with aggressive positions on Iran during discussions, according to Channel 13, citing an Israeli source. Quote, the military believes Iran's current weakened state presents an operational opportunity to return and complete the mission. Mossad believes resuming war would accelerate the deterioration of the Iranian regime and lead to its overthrow. They're still talking about regime change. Like, I don't understand, Professor. How is regime change even a discussion right now? How foolish can one be?
For the most part, this is detached from reality. I suppose there's always a remote possibility of anything that happen. It is a fact that there's significant domestic opposition to the Islamic Republic. In Tucson, where I live, there's a large number of Iranian emigres, and I know many of them. I see them, talk to them regularly. And I don't think it's...
Iranians that live outside of Iran will consume Western media. And the more they consume Western media, the more anti-Iran or anti-Islamic Republic they will be. Because propaganda against Iran is insane in the West. So just pointing to the opinions of Iranian expats, I don't think that's a good sign of what the Iranian people believe. Iranians outside of the United States are more likely to share the views of the United States, and because of the propaganda shoved at them.
Single one of them likes the Islamic Republic. They insist, based upon relatives they talk to, that the opposition to it is significant. I nevertheless, my guess is that an attack like the one launched by the United States probably galvanized support for the government, even among people who previously did not like it. There's been no rally around the flag effect in the United States. It hasn't happened. It's been the opposite. But in Iran...
I mean, you bomb 150 schoolgirls. What Iranian wants to side with the murder of 150 schoolgirls? No one.
It has happened. Trump has said, he's talked about ending Iranian civilization. It sounds like destroying Iran completely as a country, maybe killing everyone in it. The Iranians, of course, know this, and the Iranian people know this. And it's very hard to imagine anybody in Iran is going to look at this with favor. So the most likely scenario is that the regime is strengthened by what's going on here and a willingness to put up with pain. The Iranians are used to putting up with pain, it must be said. People forget this, almost a decade-long war with Iraq in the 1980s.
Yeah, it's more simple than that. They've been struggling under sanctions, under economic attack for years. So they're used to not having great economic conditions. The United States, meanwhile, is used to just having cheap oil, borrowing from abroad, just having an easy life. Well, we still have problems, but won't get into that here. Compared to Iran, an easy life. And when you have now gas prices going up to $6, $7, the United States isn't ready for that. In terms of economic warfare, Iran has a huge advantage.
Suffered under decades of U.S. sanctions and threats, an actual U.S. attack, an Israeli attack. So I think the Iranians are probably better prepared to endure the pain that this war is causing than the United States is or its allies. So I don't think there's a tendency for Israel, as far as I can tell, is detached from reality. I can't imagine what they're thinking. This has been hugely damaging to Israel at many levels.
Well, they're just trying to sabotage everything. Hold on. This has been hugely damaging to Israel on so many levels. You're talking about the Iran war, and how has the Iran war been damaging to Israel? Because they've weakened Iran significantly.
I will say, the scenario where the entire Gulf goes up in flames, where United States and Israel bomb Iran's oil infrastructure, then Iran bombs the oil infrastructure of everyone else around it, and there's no oil. That means all Gulf states are diminished and decimated for the next decade. It's great for Israel. It means it will, in that scenario, in the scenario where the entire Gulf goes up in flames, Israel will be the hegemon of the region. It's without any oil infrastructure, Iran will suffer. All the other countries will suffer too. It will be, so Israel only gets what it wants in the worst case scenario for the rest of the world, because the rest of the world is fucked in that scenario.
Okay, actually, let me give both points and you let me know. On the benefit, they've weakened Iran significantly, and they've split up the Gulf, according to some reports. I think it's overblown. They've split up the Gulf, even weakened the Gulf slightly. That's how they've benefited. The way they struggled is Iran won the war, and Iran can control the Strait of Hormuz, and Iran will come out much stronger, and the Gulf is pretty pissed off with Israel.
And another issue is the greatest advantage of Iran right now is controlling the Strait of Hormuz. But if you bomb all oil infrastructure in the region, that advantage disappears. It's controlling Strait of Hormuz doesn't matter anymore. So it's a huge loss for Iran.
Negatives.
Yep.
Okay.
Well, there's also damage to Israel's infrastructure. We don't know how much yet, but the June war, now this war, there's been significant damage to Israel's infrastructure. And again, we don't have enough details. Israel's
But that is the one place where interests diverge between the United States and Israel significantly. Is definitely not in the United States' interest to have $300 oil.
population, a lot of it is living in bomb shelters right now. The economic activity has been interrupted, extensively in Israel, and this is an important point. Huge numbers of Israelis are acquiring second passports, and some of them are actively leaving the country. Others are planning to leave. Again, I don't know what the figures are, but in the United States, in Los Angeles, there's a huge number of expatriate Israelis. And I'm sure that the current war with Iran has increased this tendency. And the Israelis who are most likely to leave are the best educated and most economically productive. Israel was very proud of being the startup nation. There's all these technology firms. It was a mainstay of its economy. A lot of the people who made that possible are leaving or have left, partly because of the war with Iran. This will have long-term damage to Israel's growth prospects, Israel's viability economically. So the damage to Israel is considerable. Also, there's a loss of support. Israel has become a pariah nation, effectively, in almost every part of the world, beginning with the occupation, the horrific things Israel's doing in Gaza. But now with the, people blame Israel for damaging the world economy, for helping start this war that's devastating the whole world. And it's costing Israel support in the key nation of the United States. There's rapidly dropping support for Israel, clearly demonstrated in public opinion polls by both supporters of both parties. Even evangelical Christians, long some of the most staunchly supportive of Israel. Sometimes they seem that evangelicals were more supportive of Israel than Jews were. That's changing, especially among younger evangelicals. And the war in Iran will accelerate that tendency. So I see Israel has done enormous damage to itself and continues to do enormous damage to itself. And is acting, as far as I can tell, irrationally.
Yeah. Yeah, it's difficult to really analyze how much influence, what type of impact this will have on Israel, because there are benefits as well. So I think long-term, Israel and the US have really sacrificed a lot of long-term strategic interests just for short-term gain. So in the US, they've traded over their alliances, which are decades-long alliances. They've just threatened them because of one stupid war.
Yeah.
In Asia as well, in Europe, they've depleted their munition stockpiles, which will take years to rebuild. They've weakened their position. Like, it's just impossible, similar to the Suez crisis. Their own Suez Canal now, similar to what that had to the British and French Empire, this is having on the American Empire. That's another way they've weakened themselves. And they've stretched their military, the impact on the military bases, and the precedent this will set. That's on the American side. On the Israeli side, which we've just gone through, in the long term, so what they're winning in the short term is they have weakened the Middle East significantly. They've invaded more Lebanese territory. They've managed to weaken Iran significantly, more than ever. So there is a lot of advantages. Iran is the weakest it's been in 10 decades. But yeah, the negative we've gone through.
Do you mind if I jump in? Is that all right? Is that okay?
No, yeah, of course. You can debate me. You can disagree with me. You can call me an idiot.
As the case may be, Iran is suffering enormously. There's no question about it. But the fact is, Iran now has its card to play and has played the card of controlling the Strait of Hormuz. That gives it enormous power. Exactly. And so I think in terms of just power considerations, that I think is the most important thing here. Okay, whatever damage has been done to its arsenal, to its infrastructure, just in power terms will be compensated by this factor of the Gulf. In terms of its population,
not only power terms, economic terms, because it's going to make bank by charging tolls on ships going through the Strait of Hormuz for at least like 2 years. Afterwards, I can tell you the tolls for the Strait of Hormuz aren't a permanent thing, because all these Gulf countries will start financing and building pipelines across to avoid the toll. And so that'll take 2-3 years. And so Iran won't be able to collect a high amount of tolls forever, but they'll make bank during that time.
Support. I suspect popular support, as for the long, at least for the medium term, been augmented by this war. It will gain popular respect that it's fought off the Americans, fought off the Israelis, protected the population. That is how the public will see it. Even people who don't like the regime, who don't like its religious fundamentalism and so on. This I think will solidify its support. So I would see it as on balance something that will strengthen Iran in the long term.
Exactly. I agree, because this is more long term in terms of them controlling the Strait of Hormuz. Really, any analyst, and I'm sure you knew this, and everyone knew they can do it, especially with drone warfare now and considering their military might. It's more that they've never done it because they know that would lead to war and significant damage to their country. But
yes, because they knew we'd bomb the hell out of them and kill their leaders, and they were afraid of that. And so as long as that fear existed, they could never close the Strait of Hormuz. I mean, they knew it wouldn't. Their supreme leader might get killed if they did that. But when you kill their supreme leader and all their leaders and bomb the hell out of the country, Now they're free to close Strait of Hormuz without consequences because what they fear has already happened.
Now that the damage has happened, well, there's no reason for them not to control it. So I think strategically, yes, because that kind of that red line's been crossed and we can never go back to the old status quo, seemingly, of them not controlling the Strait of Hormuz. So that's their big win. And yeah, in terms of the regime is more powerful than ever because people have seen it. Still, it's highly unpopular, but people have seen how.
I have doubts about that. I think that there are maybe 30% of the people in Iran that don't like the regime. True, but there's more than 50% that do support the regime at this point. If it was 50% of people that were against the regime, it would have already collapsed in the first days of the war. There isn't. The level of opposition is exaggerated.
It just protected them. And they're facing another aggressor. But from a military perspective, just pure numbers in terms of military capacity, it is the weakest it's been in many decades. The question is for how long? Because I'm confident China and Russia, especially China, will rearm them relatively quickly because they've just proven how powerful and important they are. And China and Russia would need them for that unipolar or multipolar world that we're getting into. So, yeah.
I think in addition to that, I mean, I would add that one of the reasons I think Iran is set to win the war is that, well, first of all, there was recent intelligence analysis by the CIA leaked, no doubt intentionally leaked to the press, that I believe something like 70% of Iran's inventory of missiles and drones and production facilities, launchers, everything is intact, more or less intact. And that's pretty good from their standpoint.
Well, we depleted like 50% or more of our munitions, and they have 70% of theirs. So they're doing better.
One might imagine, more than I imagine. But there's something else, too, which is, I think, as you said, Iran has proved its worth to Russia and China. And I don't think Russia and China are going to allow Iran to lose this war. And if they need a resupply, which doesn't look like they're going to need a resupply anytime soon, but if down the road they do need a resupply, I suspect Russia and China will make that possible.
Agree.
They're interested to do so.
Agree. Yep. Agree. That is so much to digest. There's so much has changed in such a short period of time.
Yes.
It's difficult really to comprehend. And I think even for the administration, they don't understand how badly they've weakened the US. At least that's my perspective.
Well,
again.
Oh, yes. The illusion of U.S. absolute military dominance, that's gone. The United States lost to Iran. That is what the world's taken away from it. No one will ever look at the United States the same because of that. And also, by the way, half of this loss, I think, is how you get into a war matters. If you get into a war without any preparation, without any plan, that's how a stronger power can lose to a weaker power. Because Iran had a 20, 30-year plan, and Trump was like, okay, let's bomb their supreme leader. And plan? What plan? And that's basically Trump. And that's why the United States lost. If this was a popular war, let's say if we had treated Iran like we treated Iraq, then Trump had gone to Congress, got authorization, convinced the American people, built up troops in the region, it would have been a much, much harder fight than Iran. And you could argue that probably you'd have tens of thousands of casualties on the American side, far more than during the Iraq War. But we could have at least opened the Strait of Hormuz. That had probably caused regime change. But it would have been really hard. But we didn't do any of that. No preparation whatsoever. So we basically gave the win to Iran.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Do you want to?
No, I get it.
The general consensus right now in America, 74% of Americans still think America won the war in Iran. That was a poll just from a few days ago. It's insane, right? But that's because you have Trump every day going out there saying, we won bigly, we destroyed their Navy, we destroyed their Air Force, and he's acting like that. He's acting like we won, and the administration putting on a show. So you still have a huge amount of people that believe. That'll change with time. I mean, when gas prices hit $6-7 a gallon, and they're like, why is this happening? Well, the explanation is, well, we actually lost the war, and we're fucked.
Too nice. Trust me. The audience loves when I'm interrupted because they want to hear from you, not me.
Okay, fine. I think this is actually the second blow. The first blow was the Ukraine war, which I think was a foolhardy thing for the United States to have done. I do see the United States having very much provoked that war. The evidence on this, I'd say, is quite overwhelming. I think they knew exactly what they were doing, but I think the outcome is very different from what they expected. They expected, through sanctions, they could destroy the Russian economy and bring down the regime of Vladimir Putin and install a vassal state, or perhaps even break up Russia.
Yeah, that's what they wanted.
Russia's taking a long time to win this war, but I think in the end they will win the war. I think they are set to win the war. And so there will be two blows to U.S. hegemony. There'll be the one in Ukraine and the one in the Gulf. I don't think U.S. hegemony is going to survive this. I think this will really truly end
Exactly.
the period of the unipolar U.S. dominance in multipolarity. I mean, others.
And the end of U.S. dollar dominance will result in some places choosing to de-dollarize, and that'll eventually be the end of the dollar too, combined with the inflation this Iran war is going to set off.
It's an obvious point, but it's worth reemphasizing. What we're seeing here in the Gulf, and secondarily also in Ukraine, is a historical turning point, and it's a lot like Pandora's box. Once you open the box and, so to speak, allow the the creatures to escape, you can't put it back in. This is a permanent change we're seeing here. I would say, in my view, it's a positive because the United States really has been a somewhat reckless force. It's very interesting. I was trained in political science, not history, and I studied international relations at graduate school. It's my field. And the idea they have is that there's status quo powers and revisionist powers. The United States, of course, is a status quo power. It has everything it wants, supposedly, because it's in control. And status quo powers are usually more peaceful because they have what they want. They want to maintain stability. The amazing thing is the United States does not act in this way during its unipolar moment. It's been acting, it always needs to push the envelope. It always needs to start new wars. It's very destabilizing is what it is. There's been war after war started by the United States with disastrous.
It's destabilizing intentionally. To dollarize the world, to get a country to adopt the dollar, you have to destroy their currency. And the best way to destroy another country's currency is to destabilize their government. And everyone then loses faith in the government. They also lose faith in the currency. And they start using the dollar. So it's not an accident that we're this destabilizing force in the world. Places like Libya, yes, they're a complete mess, civil war, open slave markets, but they're also using the U.S. dollar.
Consequences, I should add, one after another. Yeah. And there have been sanctions. There was an article, you perhaps have seen it, in the British Journal of the Lancet, a medical journal, on the health effects of sanctions, overwhelmingly by the United States. And the conclusion was 500,000 people die every year for the last 50 years, for a total of about 28 million people.
Well, hold on. So working on that piece of that article, what is it called?
It was, I don't have the title off my hand. It was the last 12 months in the Lancet, the leading British medical journal, that looked at the health effects of sanctions, what they called unilateral sanctions. They compared multilateral sanctions by the UN Security Council with unilateral sanctions. Multilateral sanctions apparently aren't so bad from the standpoint of killing people. Unilateral sanctions are terrible, apparently. And it's mostly the U.S. that does this, the U.S. and its allies, which mostly means the U.S. And the conclusion of the article was about 500,000 people have died from sanctions, mostly U.S. sanctions, for the last 50 years. I think they measured it from sometime in the 70s to about 5 years ago, so a half-century period.
Yep.
For a total of about 28 million deaths, their estimate. And so that's
U.S. policymakers would say it's a small price to pay to exert leverage on the world.
That's the effect of American hegemony, and that's quite an effect. And if we stop that, if we there's a lot of talk about the dollar losing its privileged position, its exorbitant privilege, as de Gaulle called it. I think that'll be a good thing because it's the dollar hegemony.
Yeah, this I love hearing. I love hearing commentators say, "Oh, it's a good thing that U.S. loses its dollar position." I actually agree. It's something that needs to happen. So I'm not different there, but I think it's going to be a good thing. They don't understand that the dollar losing its position as the world's reserve currency leads to complete collapse of the dollar. There's no slight off ramp where it's slightly less valuable, that it's just a slight change from the status quo. It's it's the entire collapse of probably also the U.S. financial system when the dollar goes under. It's going to be a cataclysmic event. That event will happen no matter what. It's a Ponzi scheme. The U.S. empire is getting weaker and weaker, and so the dollar will collapse. But I'm just saying, when he says it's a good thing, what happens after the collapse is a good thing, where we start having normal economy and not all this, waging wars to dollarize the world and all that nonsense. That'll be good, but it's going to be a rough period when the dollar collapses.
Hegemony that enables the U.S. to do this. Without dollar hegemony, the U.S. would have nowhere near that kind of economic influence. And so I think...
Yep. That's another thing. Either United States wants countries dollarize, peg to the dollar, that's fine too. That's essentially nearly the same thing. So yes, we like that too. If you were to take countries, a map of the world, I actually something I want to do, and I want to color all the countries that either use the dollar as their currency or are pegged to the dollar. I think it's a huge part of the world. I'm curious.
Basically, the ending of American hegemony would be a positive. I'm an American citizen, and but I don't really see this as something that's been good for the United States or for the world. And I think ending it would be a positive.
I have a pushback on that. So obviously I'm a pacifist. I don't want to see wars, but there is a fair argument to be made. I'm not sure I believe it. I really don't have an opinion here. It's a really difficult question on whether a multipolar world will lead to more deterrence for aggression. So the US would think twice before attacking another country, or it could lead to increased wars and aggression because you've got all these.
Anything would be better than the current system, where we have this corrupt leadership, basically at the U.S. Treasury and those associated with that, with the deep state part of the CIA, who are completely fucking the world over to keep the dollar going as the reserve currency, and I think they'd be willing to start a world war and even a nuclear war, rather than let the dollar collapse, and that's incredibly dangerous. And yeah, anything would be safer than that.
Poles in that multipolar world fighting through proxy wars because they can't fight directly, and that might lead to an increase in proxy wars like we saw between Russia and the US decades ago. So my concern is that we may see a lot more Vietnams and Koreas in a multipolar world. What do you think?
I think that the world has changed. Maybe he'll make the same point in that there's so much more trade, connected trade, and just average person doesn't want to fight wars. So I just think in general, you're never going to have this return to like World War, mass mobilization of World War I and II. But there'll still be wars. There'll always be some small wars, especially in third world, like Africa and whatever. But I think it'll probably be less when you don't have the CIA destabilizing countries all over the place.
I don't agree. I think the scenario, just to add to the scenario I keep hearing is that if Russia and China, especially China, achieve some level of dominance, or American and Germany is damaged or destroyed, China will then become a highly aggressive country. It'll start attacking countries. It'll do what the United States did, maybe worse.
My great fear is that when the dollar collapses, China essentially becomes the new. They might do with the Chinese yuan the same thing the U.S. did with the dollar, and have now a decade-long conspiracy focused on keeping the yuan the reserve currency. That'd be in my nightmare scenario, trading one global conspiracy to prop up a currency for another global conspiracy to prop up a currency. Hopefully that won't happen.
I don't see anything like that because Russia actually is seen even more this way. It'll invade Western Europe. It'll invade first the Baltics and invade everybody. Look at Putin; he's crazy, et cetera, et cetera. The problem we have here, apart from everything else, is data. Right? Countries that are planning aggression do a massive arms buildup, which you are not seeing by Russia and China. Let me be more specific about this. The historical parallel they make, and everybody knows this, is Germany in the 30s. That's the one everybody always brings up again and again. Germany in the 30s. If you look at Germany in the 30s, what you see is a massive arms buildup, exactly what you'd expect for a country to embark on continent-wide aggression, as Germany did. By 1939, the key element here is military spending as a percentage of GDP. Germany's spending was almost a quarter of German GDP by the time it invaded Poland. The following year, 1940, when it invaded France, I believe it was up to 40%. Then after that, it went up to 60% and kept climbing. That's what you expect, and that's what happened with Germany.
Sorry, 60% was what exactly, sorry?
60% of
60% of GDP spent on military. That is insane. Wow. Hitler, Nazi Germany, impressive that way.
That is the percentage of Germany's GDP spent on its military.
Right. That's what I thought you said, but it was that high?
I believe, yes, by the time, 40%. I think by the time of the invasion of France, 60% by the time the invasion.
How much is the US of GDP? How much are they spending right now on their military?
Well, it depends how you measure it. The official measure is, I think, 3.5%. Seems to rise possibly 5%.
3.5% versus 60%.
But that's, I think, understates it because something that's not taken into account here is that spending on the federal debt, as part of U.S. spending, and a lot of that is past military spending. You see, that was financed through debt, so it doesn't take that into account. It doesn't take, for example, the CIA is outside the military budget. There are all sorts of things that aren't accounted for here. So I don't think it's a comparable figure. My guess is a more accurate figure would probably be 6 or 7%.
Still still 90% lower than what Germany's was in the late 30s.
Well, that's true. With a bigger economy, though, much bigger economy. Nevertheless, Russia supposedly, again, it's the new Germany. It's the new Nazi Germany. Well, with a much smaller economy than America, Russia, on the eve of the war with Ukraine, spent, I believe the figure was, I've seen two different figures, 3.7% to 4.1% of its GDP. All right, and that was when it went to war with Ukraine. Now I believe it's just over 7%. Right, that's not Nazi Germany, and that's not that's not a country preparing to conquer Europe.
I don't. To be honest, Professor. Luckily, I do have a pretty educated audience, so they're not in the brain.
No, Russia is absolutely not interested in conquering Germany. Europe. What I think Russia might be interested in, of course, is taking Odessa. Now they're going to take more of Ukraine. But I think these three states here, You see, this area right here, that's Russia, this part. And this is Russia over here too. And so you have this little disconnected part. How did that happen? Well, when the Soviet Union broke up, the Soviet Union wasn't divided rationally. It wasn't these Russian speakers, ethnic Russians, huge population of those in all these three countries, and in all of this eastern half of Ukraine. These are all basically should have been part of Russia, I think. But, we wanted Russia divided and weak. So we helped encourage this setup, where these are three entirely basically new countries that were just created to break apart Russia. That is by the goal of the Ukraine war is to do this to the rest of Russia, to just break it up into a lot of small countries that the United States can then bully around because they're individual, they're divided and weak. That is the goal of the Ukraine war. It failed, but that was the goal.
Brainwashed people that believe that Russia is the Nazi Germany. I hope most of them don't believe that. They're not that extreme.
All the time.
Luckily, I don't think it's my audience. I hope so. But I do want to go. I want to press on my point though, which I'm glad you disagree with, because I want to hear the other side. Is that a multipolar world could become more violent? I'm not saying that because Russia's evil, China's evil. It's because they all have their own interests. And if there was, if Russia, I'm not saying conquer all of Eastern Europe, but maybe conquer Georgia again, expand their territory, or just advance their interests in some ways militarily, as the US has for decades. And then China does the same. China changes their policy from non-interventionist to potentially slowly, it's stepping into interventionism because the benefits is too large. Because they all don't want they all don't want to go back to a unipolar world.
You see, in today's world where democracy is so valued, controlling another country is problematic because. Like, for example, the United States, if you took control of another country, you'd have to give those people the right to vote. What's much preferable is to put a leader that's your puppet in that country and then prop them up and have them, basically puppet states, like the United States has in the Persian Gulf, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, whatever, puppet states, undemocratic, that have U.S. bases and do what the U.S. wants. That is the current way. Actually, conquering and invading and annexing, taking land and making it part of your country. That is something that most countries, I think, in today's world don't want to do. The only exception is when you have an unnatural situation like this, where you have ethnic Russians, same religion as the Russian Orthodox Church, that they're basically Russians, and they were put in Ukraine because of the collapse of Soviet Union. So Russia, in this case, it's annexing Russians. There's Russians in the country, and it's just taking back land that was really always Russian. And that same deal here. I don't think there's any risk of Russia going further and trying to conquer the rest of Europe. But if you're a country that has a huge Russian population, Russian speaker, Russian Orthodox believers, then yes, then there is a chance Russia will come for you. But not for the rest of Europe.
Well, the US has always advanced its interests militarily, bases around the world, etc. And then the other countries, the other poles, may see that to be the only way to deter American expansionism is by doing the same thing. That's my concern.
With Russia, we're talking about pure hypotheticals here. I don't see.
Of course, yeah.
I think hypotheticals. I think a lot of what we're talking about here is hypotheticals. In the United States, this was formalized. Richard Cheney talked about the 1% doctrine. He said if there's even a 1% chance a country could be a security threat, we should treat it as 100% and be willing to go to war with that country.
What's so insane about that doctrine is it's very easy to convince someone there's a 1% chance of something happening. You could convince nearly any country in the world there might be, there's 1% Israel could be a threat to the United States. Let's invade Israel. No, it's just a crazy doctrine.
It's a 1% threat, meaning that almost any hypothetical. And I think that people tend to do that. Increasingly, that's caught on with people. And
who was that? Sorry, was that Dick Cheney?
Richard Cheney, yes. Richard Cheney. And he, I think the problem with that is, hypothetically, anything's possible. Hypothetically, aliens from outer space could attack us. I don't know. The Loch Ness Monster could attack.
I don't believe those two possibilities. No, I don't believe in them.
You can't just work on hypotheticals. You have to work on evidence. I'm just not seeing any evidence that Russia's planning. I think they want a sphere of influence. They want a sphere of influence in the former Soviet Union. I think they've been up in the Baltics, because that's completely gone. But outside of the Baltics, I think they do want influence. But I don't see any evidence whatsoever of them invading Georgia. There's no evidence for that. And again, hypothetically,
I'd say the Baltic states. I'm not so sure they've given up on them because they just passed a resolution saying they can go and protect the rights of Russian speakers anywhere in the world if they need to, and Lithuania has already admitted that Ukrainian drones cross their airspace and they don't shoot them down. That's one thing that happened, and that is. That's basically an act of war against Russia, letting yeah. So I'd say I'm not so sure that Russia has given up on these Baltic states now, considering their provocations towards Russia. Hey, Proton Snail, I see you here.
It's possible, but then hypothetically anything's possible. I want to emphasize how important hypotheticals are for the thinking. In Germany recently, there's an academic with close ties to the Bundeswehr and to NATO. His name is Masala. He published a book called If Russia Wins. And it's a fiction book, literally. It's a work of fiction about Russia wins in Ukraine and then starts attacking Western Europe, beginning with the Baltics, all right? And it's based on nothing except it's fiction. It's literally made up. And it's being treated and reviewed seriously as if it's an actual documentary piece of evidence, all right? And this underscores...
It's propaganda. It's outright propaganda.
To me, how we're dealing in fantasies here, all right? This has happened before. During the Cold War, I remember a British general in the 70s wrote a book called The Third World War about the same thing. Again, a fictional book taken as fact.
Can I, so...
It's really funny. I was driving across the country a number of years ago, and I brought a book on tape with me, Dick Clancy book. And, you know, it's always some type of military, global, political intrigue. And in this book, the Russians were the good guys. It was against an anti-China book. Because I was like really surprised because, you know, Russians are the bad guys in all types of media these days. Well, that book was written before Putin came to power. And so it was an entirely anti-China book. And the Russians were our hapless, semi-useless allies against China in that book. And ever since in all Clancy books, ever since Putin came to power, Russians are the bad guys, and in Hollywood, it's whoever the United States elite or Exchange Stabilization Fund, deep state, whatever you want, whoever they regard as the bad guys are people they want to take down. They become the bad guys in all media.
It's not purely that's hypothetical. It's not fiction, really, because if you look at historically, the last time we lived in a multipolar world was before World War I, and the poles were various European countries: Russia, Germany, Austria-Hungary, US, France, the Ottoman Empire. And then the US and Japan came in after World War I. So that was a unipolar world, and that was some of the most violent times we've seen as a species. And we've had other examples before that as well. And then we got into a bipolar world, and that was the US versus Soviet Union, and that was also more violent than what we're seeing right now in Afghanistan, Korea, Vietnam, etc. The Cold War, and getting close to a nuclear war. So that's why I worry. I think the Pax Americana world is far from perfect. US foreign policy has been disastrous in so many ways, in heartbreaking ways, disastrous for the world and disastrous for the US. But I worry the alternative is not better. That's my concern. Again, I know you disagree. But
it's a leap into the unknown. I'll grant you that. And normally I would say that the devil you know is better than the devil you don't know. All right. And you might say that given the risks and the hypothetical possibilities, and again, we don't really know, maybe we should keep American hegemony. But the problem is, again, if the United States were a status quo power, all right, and we're just satisfied to maintain what it has, which is overwhelming dominance, and not push the envelope, then I would say you have a case to make. That there's a strong case for that. But the U.S. always has to push the envelope, always has to start a new war, to destabilize, and has to have these horrific sanctions with enormous human cost. I'd say given that, I think we'd have to take the risk. Which I don't think is that hard, honestly. Given the evidence we have.
No, you could be right. Like, a multipolar world does lead to deterrence as well. Like the US may think twice about attacking Iran if China was a lot more powerful.
Everyone's friends with Tom Hanks, yes.
For example. So yeah, very, very fair argument.
There's another thing too, which is somebody in Goldstein, I forget his name, he's actually a former classmate of mine in graduate school, wrote a very influential book, basically that societies have learned that war basically is, as societies become more educated, all right, they become less warlike. We've achieved a certain level of education, at least in the West, that most people just don't see war as that glorious anymore. I mean, look at the Germans, look at the Japanese. Germany is talking about rearming. I just don't see a lot of Germans that I've met. Young Germans are ready to go and start, living in trenches and have people throw grenades at them. I just don't. The Germans I've met. Rearming
doesn't really need that many people anymore. Like we're getting into a world where cold warfare and AI is changing the landscape a bit.
It is true, but nevertheless,
I disagree. I'd say that for a while, with like if you're talking about 20 years ago, yes, we got into compared to like the Second World War 20 years ago. you needed a lot less troops to do something. You could do a lot through air power, and you could, it had changed. The size of militaries could be reduced a lot, and you could still wage war. But now it's the opposite has happened. Drone warfare. Watching what has happened in Ukraine, they stop using tanks, they stop using vehicles in most situations. It's all people on the ground and drones on the front line. And you also need far more troops because you have to hold huge front lines. It's become more manpower intensive in the Russia-Ukraine war than compared to past wars. And so we've gone in the other directions, and the West hasn't adapted to that yet.
You do see even those kinds of wars entail enormous damage. I mean, look, Israel has been enormously damaged. There are exceptions to this. And I think the two big exceptions are Israel and the United States, which seem to be Israel's a sort of modern-day Sparta, obviously. I think what you have also in both of these countries, in the United States, are institutional interests that benefit from war, beginning, of course, with Eisenhower's military-industrial complex, but it's much broader than that, including much of academia. Elite academia is totally integrated with the military and the CIA. I can give examples of this. Elite journalism, think tanks. There's a whole network in the United States that favor war, essentially. Yeah. And I think that's one of the reasons you have it, is you have institutional interests that simply can't part from the idea.
Yes, and it's set up that way intentionally, because for the dollar to maintain its hegemony of the world, we need to constantly expand the part of the world that's dollarized. Like, when we took over Iraq, it became dollarized. If all these countries like Somalia, Algeria, Lebanon, all these countries that we overthrew, they start using the dollar. And the more places, like when we print $1 billion, the more area that $1 billion has to be spread out over, the less inflation that causes. That's the easy way to think about it. And so that is one reason we're whole geared to more and more places. But we've run out of easy targets. Now you have Iran and Russia left, and we're not going to succeed with those.
Endless wars. It always has to be in a war in the United States. And I think Israel is something of a miniature United States in that respect. But
on steroids.
On steroids, yes, you might put it that way. On steroids, absolutely. But I don't think the rest of the world is quite as warlike as I think when realists talk about the naturally aggressive nature of countries, I wonder if they're talking about countries in general or human nature, or if they're talking about the United States is like that. That's the United States they're talking about. I come to the conclusion it's more the latter. It's much more the latter. That's my take on it.
Can I ask you again about Israel? Like, I'm really trying to understand. Again, it's also complex because you've got a short window in which they can try to get as much as they can because the sentiment has already shifted globally. I think that ship has sailed, and we are going to see it.
If we're talking about a multipolar world and war, I think in a multipolar world, Russia and China do become more aggressive. One reason they're less aggressive now is because you have this behemoth and unhinged behemoth, I'll add, called the United States. They're going around waging wars and destabilizing things. And in that scenario, Russia and China are more demurred. They have to be the responsible parties to avoid the world going up in flames. If we're talking a world where the United States is no longer one of the biggest players, and then I think Russia and China do become more aggressive, and also in terms of military, if they don't have the threat of the United States hanging over them. However, on balance, even with them becoming more aggressive, having the United States not going around starting wars every 2 seconds is still going to be a net gain for humanity.
A change in U.S. approach, U.S. policy towards Israel. People have woken up to it. Some people disagree with me. They tell me Mario's too entrenched within the system that it's not that easy, and all these different pacts could easily rebrand and could also. I had someone running for office kind of tell me this recently. You'll have them rebrand. You'll also have Joe Kent. And they'll start going through other different lobbying groups, etc. So there's so many different ways to hack the system because the system is flawed. And even though the sentiment is shifting, it may not be enough. Now, I do think it's enough. Most people agree it's probably enough to shift U.S. policy towards Israel. So with that in mind, Israel has a short window on being able to do as much as they can in the Middle East. Trump's administration could be their last administration of impunity and unconditional support. So the worry is that Israel would continue. We just go very aggressive right now, scorched earth, as we're seeing in Lebanon, the leveling of villages. We're seeing in Syria, they decide whenever they want and strike the country. And they're allegedly arming the Druze right now there as well. And with Iran, they may just unilaterally strike Iran. Does that scenario worry you? Is that a possibility? Can they afford it?
I'm seeing a level of irrationality in Israel that is quite striking, even exceeding that of the United States. I'm a little bit surprised by Netanyahu. I mean, a lot of this is religious. That people like Ben Gvir and Smotrich, who clearly are religious, messianic.
This is one thing that I always have a problem with. We talk about irrational for Israel. countries aren't people. Israel isn't a country thinking Netanyahu is the leader of Israel. And is it rational for Netanyahu to do or to attack Iran? For just from his personal, as a human being perspective, yeah, I can see it. He's under corruption allegations, and his alternative is to accept the war ending in failure, accepting the end of his political career and spending the rest of his life in jail, probably because of the corruption. Between spending his rest of his life in jail or choosing to escalate and not spending the rest of his life in jail, or at least delaying that, for Netanyahu personally, it makes more sense to escalate. Maybe not for Israel as a country, but for Netanyahu, definitely escalation is the path that makes more sense for him.
Attitude based upon the Old Testament and so on. A little bit reminds a lot of obviously Christian fundamentalists in the United States. It's a lot like that. But Netanyahu is secular. He's not that religious. And he's educated. His father was a professor at Cornell. He himself went to MIT. He's not stupid.
But he is corrupt, and he is under investigation for corruption. And the only reason that investigation is on hold is because they're at war with Iran. And that's why it's not proceeding further. The war ends, especially in what is regarded as a loss for Israel in terms of a stronger Iran. Well, that corruption investigation picks up again, and Netanyahu might very well end up in jail. It's a pretty important angle and something to mention.
And what he's doing seems to me completely irrational. And so I can't read his mind.
Well, if you don't take into account the corruption charges pending against him, yes, it might be harder to understand.
I can't tell you why he's doing this and what exactly he's thinking, but his actions clearly indicate a reckless irrationality, totally contrary to his country's interests. And so given what he's already done, given what he's advocating, I think that there's enormous risks with regard to Israel, of Israel acting unilaterally, including, and this is what really worries me, nuclear weapons. Israel
actually worries you.
What's that?
It worried me more when the missiles were flying. Now that the missiles are not flying, at least for now, I'm less worried about Israel using a nuke, because I think it's practically unthinkable that the war would start up again and the first strike by Israel would be using a bunch of nukes. I just don't see that happen. There would first be an escalation, conventional escalation. Like, I expect bombing Iran's oil infrastructure to happen before any nukes are used. So as long as Iran still has oil infrastructure, I'd say the chances of Israel dropping a nuke on Iran are very close to zero for the moment.
Actually worries you. I didn't expect you to say that. Others have been saying it. My last guest was talking about it as well. Many are worried about it.
A shorter day on average, probably.
It's an enormous risk. Well, anytime you have nuclear weapons, there's always a risk of them being used. That's never zero. And Israel has always seen and has convinced itself through constant argument. A lot of times it's a matter of sometimes using propaganda, then starting to believe your own propaganda over time.
Thanks for the lurk, navigating.
You have nuclear weapons, there's always a risk of them being used. That's never zero. And Israel has always seen and has convinced itself through constant argument. A lot of times it's a matter of sometimes using propaganda, then starting to believe your own propaganda over time. I think that's what's happened here in Israel.
That's how we got into this Iran war. In big part is Trump believing the propaganda about how powerful the United States and how we could never lose in any situation, and then thinking he could attack Iran without any type of real preparations or plan.
Has taken the view that Iran is an existential threat to its existence. It's not, actually. It's absurd to say that, but that is what they've convinced themselves of, and that's what they keep saying. And they simply cannot live within the Islamic Republic of Iran. And the idea that Iran might end up winning this war, coming out on top, in fact, will win this war by all indications, and have to be stopped at all costs. And if you can't do it through conventional means, what's left? Nuclear weapons. And there's nothing to stop Israel, including the United States, from using nuclear weapons if they decide to do so. And so, if you have this nuclear option, it always will be that temptation. I don't think this is likely, but it's definitely a possibility here. I don't know. What do you think? What are your thoughts on what I just said, Mario?
Greatest irony would be like in a month or two, Israel decides to use a nuke, and surprise, surprise, Iran had also managed to already acquire nukes. It just hadn't tested them yet. And Tel Aviv and Jerusalem ceased to exist, and the state of Israel is gone forever. Bro, no, I just think, I think Iran shouldn't have nukes, and Israel shouldn't have nukes. Actually, I think Israel shouldn't have nukes even more than Iran, personally.
No, I've had many guests talk about it. It's just so, like, it's what's upsetting me is, like, every time I consider something like unimaginable, and there is no way we would cross that line. It goes back to before I got that as deep as I am now. When it comes to the Russia-Ukraine war, I never thought Putin would actually pull the trigger and invade Ukraine. Then when he did, I'm like, oh, it must be a short operation, but it'll never be a prolonged war. Then I'm like, NATO would never supply X, Y, Z to Ukraine. Istanbul peace talks will reach peace. And then I constantly get proven wrong, and it happened again now. With the Gaza war, I'm like, I don't think there'll be full-blown war in Lebanon. There is no way Israel will strike Iran. Like, these are some of the things that, no one wants to mess with this.
I have to admit, I did that one time. With regard to Trump attacking Iran. Israel, yes, I know they're crazy. They could do anything they want. But Trump, I did not believe Trump was stupid enough to attack and, kill Iran's supreme leader. It was political suicide the moment he did that. I didn't think he was stupid enough. He was uninformed enough. It's gullible enough to be tricked into it. The real reason I believe that is just can't think of anything else like it. Any action a president could take to absolutely end their presidency, like Trump decided to do with attacking Iran's supreme leader. That never happens. Like one action's completely finishing off a U.S. president. It usually isn't that. Usually most scandals you can survive, but Trump won't survive the Iran war.
It's in the world order. And of course, the US would not get involved with Iran. And here we are. So it's like I get constantly proven wrong, where now I'm just too wary to discount anything. But it's also worrying. Like we're living in a war of nuclear weapons where we can destroy our world many times over. And to see us constantly cross these red lines.
Yeah, it's exaggerated. We can't wipe off all humanity from the face of Earth. We can just wipe off most of it. The Earth is a pretty big place.
But the fact that people, again, including David Sachs and Trump's administration, Tucker, Joe Kent, all these, I think Joe Kent talked about it, all these, people that have significant access or knowledge genuinely worry about nuclear weapons. Tucker supported Trump for many, many years. He met Trump before the Iran war, tried to convince him not to start it. And those people are worried about nuclear weapons on the American side. Mm-hmm. And then even a lot more people are worried about it on the Israeli side.
Well, I think that there's a larger issue too, which is nuclear proliferation, which is that this has been going on for a while now. And the counterpoint to what, Iran is being pulverized.
I think one reason the United States absolutely doesn't want the spread of nuclear weapons, everyone shouldn't want the spread of nuclear weapons. But the United States in particular he couldn't bully all these small countries, collapse of governments if they had nuclear weapons. It would make the United States' role of maintaining global hegemony far more complicated if there were more North Koreas. And so that's why the United States is very serious about that issue.
I'm sure the people in the government, the people worldwide were saying, Iran was stupid not to have developed nuclear weapons a long time ago. They had nuclear weapons.
It was. And Supreme Leader paid the price for his stupidity in that regard.
This would have happened. Look at North Korea. North Korea developed nuclear weapons and convincing delivery systems, and the U.S. leaves them alone, basically. Okay, they don't attack them the way they were attacking Iran. Iran, if they were smart, they would have developed nuclear weapons. Look, another counterpoint, of course, is Libya.
Yep.
Libya, in I think the early 21st century, I forget the exact year, had a nuclear research program bent on developing nuclear weapons under Gaddafi. Agreed, I think in 2003, to give it up with a tacit agreement that the United States would not overthrow the government. And of course, in 2011, the U.S. promptly, while working with Britain and France, overthrew the government. Gaddafi was tortured to death. I gather there's floating around a video of him being tortured to death.
Yeah, it was horrible what happened to him. And he deserved it. He was stupid. He trusted the United States, and he got fucked. That's Iran trusted the United States 2 times during negotiations. They got fucked. Trusting the United States, you will get fucked, because that's all the United States is interested in, is fucking over the rest of the world. Yeah, I'm serious. You either have Europe, that's basically EU is basically an extension of the United States. It's how the U.S. leverages its control over Europe. You have puppet states in the Gulf. You look at the rest of the world. Either puppet states or states very controlled by the United States, or you have complete civil war areas like Libya. They're only like Russia, China, and Iran are actually functioning countries that aren't beholden to the United States, and that's why the United States is doing everything in its power to attack them.
People would say Gaddafi was a fool. He should never.
Well, and Cuba and formerly Venezuela, but Cuba is just so small; it really doesn't matter.
Never have trusted the Americans or the British. He should never have given up his nuclear weapons. If he hadn't given up his nuclear weapons, none of that would have happened. And so what I fear is that Iran will, no matter what they say, develop nuclear weapons after all that's happened here. They will consider these two precedents in Libya and North Korea, as well as their own experience. And then basically when they develop nuclear weapons, it'll lead to a whole string of additional states developing nuclear weapons. Turkey, Saudi Arabia, in East Asia, several, in Europe, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, Poland, Sweden, Germany, I can go on and on. And that is enormously dangerous for the survival of the human race. I don't think people appreciate. I have to say, I mean, you're younger, maybe too young to remember this or being around, but I am old enough to remember in the 80s, during the Cold War, there was constant fear of nuclear war. I remember as a child growing up and people were constantly talking about it. What's amazing is nothing has changed in terms of the danger. If anything, it's...
At one point, I've lived in a house that had a bomb shelter in the basement. It's quite something.
Worse now. What has changed, we no longer seem afraid of nuclear war. We no longer talk about it. There's no anti-nuclear weapons movement around as there used to be. And so that has much bothered me, that there seems to be very little popular understanding of how dangerous this is.
Yeah. People woke up to it very briefly in the Russia-Ukraine war and then moved on. So we get distracted very easily. That's a problem. It's like the problem is there's a lot of issues still there and we just move on. I was speaking to Senator Ron Johnson a few days ago and he just reminded me of how we all move. And Dr. I can't remember who he is, but one of the leading doctors you'd know, everyone would know him, when it came to COVID. Lisa, can you send me his name? I hate forgetting names. Not Dr. Fauci. Dr. Fauci would not come on my show, ever. Dr. Robert Malone. And it was a reminder for me how bad things were in COVID and how susceptible we are as a society to the pandemic. And then gain-of-function research that led to COVID, the outbreak, is still ongoing right now. Nuclear proliferation. All the treaties with Russia and the US have been suspended as far as I'm aware, and Russia-Ukraine war is still raging on with deaths on a daily basis. And now we have what we're seeing in the Middle East, where the US and Trump is being put in a corner, where Iran is coming out stronger than ever.
The world is less safe than ever. Added to this is all EU's provocations against Russia in the Ukraine war. That very good chance that expands over the next year. So yes, we're living in the least safe time period of our lifetimes, and that's the U.S. empire is collapsing, and empires collapsing are messy things.
Israel was acting irrationally, and they have a nuclear weapon. And then Saudi got security guarantees from Pakistan, has a nuclear weapon. It is I don't think people realize how the times we're in, how dangerous they are, which is sad. It's scary.
Well, I think
and it's another reason we live in such dangerous times. You have people like Asmongold who are completely uninformed about everything, and they're like, just bomb them, more bombs, just bomb. No understanding what he's even urging for. He's urging for the destruction of the world economy, complete collapse of our way of life. And he's just like, go for it, all gun-ho, bomb them. Oh, God, Asmongold is such a flat earther on Iran.
One of the considerations I would add to that is that we focus on the wrong threats. I mean, we're talking about hypothetical threats of China becoming aggressive, Russia becoming further aggressive. Again, these are hypothetical threats. They're much more tangible, serious threats in terms of nuclear proliferation, which we ignore completely. There's the possibility of another pandemic, which amazingly we just decided to ignore once again. There are all sorts of much more tangible threats that we could focus on that deserve much more attention. But instead, I think the only real threats people focus on are China and Russia and Iran, I guess.
What's it? Not found. Yeah. Well, I don't think I'm signed in to Facebook right now, so it's not letting me go in. It's to see up. Oh, you can't see it. It just says this, not found. I'll look at. I'll do that afterwards.
And again, these should be very low in terms of danger here.
The biggest threat to the world. Israel is number one threat to the world, in my opinion. Now, North Korea as a second. That will be my. I don't know much about North Korea, but probably be the regime one of the most brutal regimes out there and one of the most unpredictable ones out there. I don't know. These are the top two.
Well,
three with the foreign policy now.
Well, I guess the idea is we focus on is traditional great power threats because our mind is so focused.
Yeah, I need to sign in, so I'll do it afterwards. I've got the link.
But the idea basically that nuclear weapons in of themselves are a threat, nuclear proliferation is a threat, much greater than anything posed by North Korea, which is a threat. But the whole idea basically of nuclear destruction of the human race, that's just not discussed. It's not taken seriously. Yeah. You could say that's the number one threat. Climate change does get attention, but nowhere near enough. There's and pandemics, again, the whole idea of gaining...
climate change, nowhere near enough. Yeah, well, you have people. You have to take their knowledge on one serious, like the topics he knows, like Iran, seriously. But he believes in global warming, this guy, and Informed on one subject, not informed on another.
Function research, as we discussed, we're not properly assessing the issue of threat here and properly ordering our worry about threat.
I want to read out, as a final thing, a report that just came in while we're speaking by the Wall Street Journal. We're talking about Israel. Well, Israel built a clandestine, a secret military outpost in the Iraqi desert before the Iran war to support its air campaign, housing special forces and serving as a logistical hub for search and rescue teams. The base was set up with U.S. knowledge. In early March, a shepherd reported unusual military activity, including helicopter flights and Iraqi troops who were sent to investigate. Israel launched airstrikes to protect the facility, killing one Iraqi soldier and wounding 2 others. The audacity, it's not finished, I'll read the rest of it, but the audacity, they're going to check out a military base set up secretly in their own country and they get struck. Iraq has just been decimated, it's sad. Iraq later complained to the UN, attributing the attack to the US, which was not involved. The Iraqi military found evidence that a foreign force had been present. The base allowed Israeli forces to operate closer to the battlefield, with the Israeli Air Force carrying out thousands of strikes against Iran during the 5-week campaign. Israeli Air Force special forces trained for commando operations were also present. And then an update here by Israeli army radio, using careful phrasing, neither confirmed nor denied the Wall Street Journal report on a secret Israeli base in Iraq. However, it drew attention to a report published by the Saudi newspaper Independent Arabia on 4th of March, days after the war began, describing a commando operation by foreign forces in the Iraqi desert near Najaf. Army radio noted that Najaf is about 200 kilometers from Iran and over 800 kilometers from Israel, suggesting that if Israel did establish a secret forward base in the area, it would effectively turn Iran into a third circle country, from a third circle country into a first circle country for Israeli operations. And then a quick comment here on the story.
So the lesson of this is that, it's very likely that Israel has bases of operation in Iran. And yes, of course, remember the protest and they handed out all those guns. Well, you don't smuggle in thousands of guns and thousands of Starlink terminals without some network in the country, without some bases. So yes, Israel is targeting Iran. It probably has bases of operation in Iran. Anyway, this was an interesting video. This will be on YouTube. Like and subscribe. Come watch on Kick or Twitch. And I'll see you next video. Bye.